You know that moment when you realize you're not actually part of your own family? Yeah, I had that moment 3 weeks ago, standing in my kitchen, staring at a text message that made my entire world crumble. My sister Jennifer sent it. 9 words that changed everything. "We gave your ticket to Mom. The grandkids love her more." Just like that. No warning, no apology. Just a casual bomb dropped into my life like she was telling me they switched pizza toppings. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up here, questioning every single relationship I thought I had, wondering if I was the villain in my own family's story, or if I had every right to feel like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. It started 6 months ago when my niece Emma turned 8. I've always been close to Emma and her brother Lucas. I mean, really close. I'm the cool aunt, you know? The one who remembers their favorite candy, who shows up to their soccer games even when their own parents are too busy, who sends them funny memes and stays up late on FaceTime helping with science projects. I thought we had something special. I really did. Emma's birthday party was at one of those trampoline parks, and I drove 2 hours to get there because I wouldn't miss it for the world. I brought her this giant stuffed unicorn she'd been talking about for months, the one that costs like $80, but I didn't care because seeing her face light up was worth every penny. At the party, my sister Jennifer pulled me aside. She had that look on her face, you know the one, where someone's about to ask you for something and they're already assuming you'll say yes. She told me about this family trip they were planning to Disney World in Florida. A whole week, she said. Magic Kingdom, Epcot, all of it. The kids had never been, and they were saving up for this big family vacation. Then she dropped it on me. They wanted me to go. They wanted Aunt Sarah there to make it even more magical for the kids. I was thrilled. I mean, genuinely excited. I hadn't been to Disney since I was a kid myself, and the idea of experiencing it through Emma and Lucas's eyes, seeing them meet their favorite characters, riding Space Mountain with them, it all sounded perfect. Jennifer told me the dates, late October, right after Halloween. She said they were booking a villa that could fit everyone. It would be her and her husband Dave, the kids, my brother Marcus and his wife Ashley with their daughter Sophia, and me. Oh, and Mom. Of course Mom would be there. Mom is always there for everything. Don't get me wrong, I love my mother. But there's always been this thing, this dynamic where she's the sun and we're all just planets orbiting around her, making sure she's happy, making sure she's included, making sure she feels valued and loved and appreciated. It's exhausting sometimes, but that's just how our family works. I said yes immediately. I started planning right away. I requested the time off work, which wasn't easy because October is busy season at the marketing firm where I work, but I made it happen. I started setting aside money from every paycheck. 200 here, 300 there. I bought new luggage. I researched the best restaurants in the parks. I made a spreadsheet of all the rides and shows, organizing them by park and priority level because I'm that person, the planner, the one who makes sure everything runs smoothly. I even bought matching Mickey ear headbands for me and the kids, custom ones with their names embroidered on them. Emma's in purple with sparkles, Lucas's in blue with a superhero theme, and mine in teal because that's my favorite color. The months flew by. I was counting down the days. I'd text the family group chat with fun facts about Disney. Did you know the Haunted Mansion has 999 happy haunts? Did you know you can get free water at any quick-service restaurant? I was that annoying person who was maybe a little too excited, but I didn't care. This was going to be amazing. This was going to be one of those core memories the kids would have forever, and I'd be right there in it with them. Finally, after years of feeling like I was on the outside of my own family looking in, I was going to be truly part of something. 3 weeks before the trip, I got my ticket confirmation. Jennifer had been handling all the bookings because she's a travel agent and gets discounts, so I just Venmo'd her my share of everything. The villa rental, the park tickets, everything came out to about $2,200. That's not nothing, right? That's a significant chunk of money. But I paid it happily because this was important. This was family. The night I got the confirmation email, I couldn't sleep. I just kept imagining it, watching Emma meet Cinderella, holding Lucas's hand on the Tower of Terror, having dinner at Cinderella's castle with everyone laughing and taking pictures and just being together. Then came the text. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work, sitting in a meeting about our Q4 marketing strategy, trying to pay attention to pie charts and projections when my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw it was from Jennifer. The family group chat, actually. My stomach did this weird flip because something about the timing felt off. Why was she texting in the middle of the day? I waited until the meeting was over, walked back to my desk, grabbed my phone, and opened the message. And there it was. Those 9 words that I'll probably remember for the rest of my life. "We gave your ticket to Mom. The grandkids love her more." I read it 3 times. 4 times. I kept thinking I was misunderstanding something. Maybe it was a joke? Maybe autocorrect had mangled whatever she actually meant to say. But no, there was a longer message right after it. Jennifer explaining, in that casual way people explain things when they've already decided and don't really care how you feel about it, that they'd had a family meeting. Without me, obviously. They all got together, her and Marcus and their spouses, and decided that it would be better if Mom took my spot on the trip. Better for the kids, she said. Mom had been feeling left out lately, she said. Mom does so much for everyone and deserves this, she said. And anyway, the kids are at that age where they really bond with their grandmother, and wouldn't I want what's best for Emma and Lucas and Sophia? I sat there at my desk, staring at my computer screen without seeing it, feeling like someone had punched me in the chest. My coworker Amanda walked by and asked if I was okay, and I couldn't even answer her. I just nodded and tried to smile, but I'm pretty sure it came out more like a grimace. I went to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall and just breathed for like 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. They gave away my ticket that I paid for, my spot on a trip I'd been planning and dreaming about for 6 months, and they did it without even asking me, without even giving me a heads up. Just decided amongst themselves that I was expendable. I finally managed to type out a response. My hands were shaking so bad I had to retype it 3 times. I asked about my money. $2,200 isn't something I can just write off. I'm not rich. I work hard for my paycheck, and I budget carefully, and that money was supposed to be for an amazing family experience, not just gone into thin air. Jennifer's response came back fast. Too fast. Like she'd been expecting this question and had her answer ready. She said they'd already given my money to Mom to cover her expenses. Mom is on a fixed income, she reminded me. Mom can't afford a trip like this on her own. Surely I understood that. Surely I wasn't going to make this about money when it was really about family and doing the right thing. I felt sick. Actually nauseous. Because here's the thing, and this is what really got me. They'd reframed the whole situation to make me look selfish if I objected. It wasn't about them uninviting me from a trip I'd paid for and planned for and been excited about for half a year. No. It was about me being unwilling to sacrifice for my own mother. It was about me prioritizing my own fun over what the grandkids needed. It was about me not being a team player. They'd set it up so perfectly that any complaint I made would make me look like the bad guy, and I think they knew exactly what they were doing. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. I closed the group chat and just sat with it for a while. That whole afternoon at work was a blur. I kept picking up my phone and putting it down, drafting messages and deleting them, trying to figure out what to say or if I should say anything at all. Part of me wanted to call Jennifer and scream at her. Part of me wanted to be mature and understanding. Part of me wanted to cry. I did all 3, actually, just at different times. By the time I got home that evening, I'd gone through every possible emotion and landed somewhere in the realm of numb disbelief. My apartment felt too quiet. I live alone, which I usually love, but that night it just felt lonely. I ordered Thai food that I barely touched and sat on my couch scrolling through my phone, looking at all the Disney research I'd saved. The restaurant reservations I'd made months in advance. The custom itinerary I'd created with little icons and time slots, and notes about which rides had the shortest lines at which times. I'd put so much thought into this, so much effort, and it meant nothing. They just erased me from the trip like I was never part of it to begin with. Around 9 that night, Marcus called. My brother has always been the peacekeeper in the family, the one who tries to smooth things over when there's conflict. He's 4 years older than me, and has always had this protective big brother thing, or at least I thought he did. He started the conversation all casual, asking how I was doing, talking about the weather, completely avoiding the elephant in the room. Finally, I just said it. I told him I saw the messages. I told him I was hurt. I waited for him to apologize, to say they'd made a mistake, to tell me they'd figure something else out. Instead, he sighed. This long, tired sigh like I was being difficult. He said he understood I was disappointed, but I needed to look at the bigger picture. Mom had been dropping hints for weeks about wanting to spend more time with the grandkids. She'd been feeling depressed, he said, empty nest syndrome or something, even though we all moved out decades ago. The trip would be really good for her mental health, and besides, there would be other trips, other opportunities for me to spend time with the kids. Why was I making such a big deal out of this one vacation? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Other trips? Other opportunities? I wanted to reach through the phone and shake him. This wasn't just some random vacation. This was 6 months of planning, 6 months of excitement, 6 months of being included and feeling like I mattered to this family. And he was acting like I was being dramatic for caring. I asked him point blank if he thought it was okay that they'd made this decision without even talking to me first, that they'd just announced it like it was already done, that they'd given away money I'd worked hard to save up. He got quiet for a second, and I thought maybe, finally, he was going to admit they'd handled it badly. Nope. He said that's actually exactly why they didn't tell me beforehand. They knew I'd make it difficult. They knew I'd be upset and try to talk them out of it, and they didn't want the drama. It was easier to just make the decision and inform me after the fact. Easier for who? I wanted to scream. Easier for them, obviously, because they didn't have to deal with my feelings or my input or the uncomfortable reality that they were treating me like garbage. Marcus kept talking, saying I needed to be more flexible, more understanding. Family means sacrifice, he said. Sometimes we have to put others first. And I just lost it. I told him that I'd been putting others first my entire life, that I'm always the one who adjusts my schedule, who drives hours for birthday parties, who shows up when people need help moving or babysitting or someone to vent to at midnight. I'm always there, always available, always willing to sacrifice. And the one single time I was looking forward to something for myself, something that would also benefit the kids I love so much, they took it away. They didn't even have the decency to ask. They just decided I didn't matter as much as Mom, that my feelings and my money and my time were all negotiable, disposable. Marcus got defensive. He said I was being selfish and making everything about me, that Mom has done so much for all of us over the years, and this was a chance to give back to her. That the kids really do have a special bond with their grandmother, and it would mean the world to them to have her there. And then he said the thing that really cut deep. He said maybe if I had kids of my own, I'd understand how important grandparents are. Maybe if I wasn't so focused on my career and my own life, I'd get why family has to come first sometimes. I hung up on him. I've never hung up on anyone in my life, but I couldn't listen to another word. My hands were shaking, and my eyes were burning with tears I was trying not to let fall. The implication was so clear. Because I'm 34 and single and childless, my relationship with my nieces and nephew doesn't count as much. Because I chose to focus on building a career I love instead of getting married and having babies, I'm somehow less invested in this family, less important, less worthy of consideration. It was like every insecurity I've ever had about my life choices was being weaponized against me. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every family interaction from the past few years, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that I wasn't as valued as I thought I was. And the worst part? I found them. So many little moments that I'd brushed off at the time but now seemed significant. Like last Christmas when they took a family photo and I had to ask 3 times before someone finally made room for me in the frame. Or Emma's school play where there weren't enough seats and I was the one who offered to stand in the back. Or Marcus's birthday dinner where they made the reservation for 6 people and seemed surprised when I showed up, like they'd forgotten to count me. I'd always told myself I was being oversensitive, that I was reading into things. But maybe I wasn't. Maybe I'd been seeing the truth all along and just didn't want to believe it. Maybe I've always been the optional family member, the one they include when it's convenient but exclude when something better comes along. And Mom, she's always been the priority. I get it, I really do. She's our mother. She raised us. She sacrificed for us. But does that mean I don't matter at all? Does that mean my feelings are irrelevant? The next morning, I called in sick to work. I know that's probably weak, but I couldn't face people. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. I spent the whole day in my pajamas, eating ice cream for breakfast and scrolling through old photos on my phone. There were so many pictures of me with Emma and Lucas. At the zoo, at the park, baking cookies in my kitchen, reading bedtime stories during sleepovers. Their little faces looking up at me with so much trust and affection. Had I imagined that connection? Or did they really prefer their grandmother and I'd just been fooling myself this whole time? Around noon, my phone started buzzing with messages from the family group chat. Jennifer was sharing Disney packing lists and talking about which park they should hit first. Mom chimed in with her excitement, talking about how she'd always dreamed of going to Disney World, but never had the chance when we were kids. She thanked everyone for including her and said she couldn't wait to make magical memories with her precious grandchildren. Not one person mentioned me. Not one person acknowledged that I should have been part of this conversation. It was like I'd been completely erased. I left the group chat, just quietly exited without saying anything. I figured if they didn't even notice I was missing from the trip planning, they wouldn't notice I was missing from the chat either. And you know what? I was right. 3 hours went by and nobody said a word. Nobody asked where I went. Nobody reached out privately to check on me. That silence told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in this family hierarchy. I could disappear completely and it wouldn't even register. That evening, my best friend Rachel came over. I'd texted her earlier just saying I needed company, and she showed up with wine and Chinese takeout and her biggest sweatpants because she knows me well enough to know when things are really bad. I told her everything, the whole story from beginning to end, and with every word I felt more and more validated because her face was doing that thing where she looks progressively more horrified. When I finished, she just sat there for a minute, chopsticks frozen halfway to her mouth, and then she said the words I'd been afraid to even think. She said my family was treating me like garbage, and I had every right to be furious. Rachel is one of those people who doesn't sugarcoat things. She's blunt, sometimes brutally so, but she's also fiercely loyal, and she's been my best friend since college. She knows my family, has been to countless family gatherings over the years, and she's seen the dynamics firsthand. She said she'd always noticed how they treated me differently, how I was always the one making effort, the one accommodating everyone else's schedules, the one who never complained when plans changed last minute, or when I got stuck with the worst seat at the table, or when my accomplishments got glossed over while they celebrated everyone else's milestones. She'd mentioned it a few times over the years, but I'd always defended my family, insisting she was reading too much into it. Now she wasn't holding back. She said what they did was beyond disrespectful, that taking someone's paid spot on a trip without their consent is essentially theft, that the way they'd framed it to make me look selfish for being upset was emotional manipulation, that using the grandkids as justification was particularly low because they knew how much I loved those kids and how guilty I'd feel if I pushed back. She asked me what I was going to do about it, and I realized I had no idea. What could I do? Demand my money back and create even more family drama? Insist they uninvite Mom, which would make me look like a monster? There was no good option here. They'd backed me into a corner where any move I made would make me the villain. Rachel suggested I talk to my dad. My parents divorced when I was 12, and Dad moved to Arizona for work when I was in college. We're not super close, but we talk every few weeks, and he's always been more reasonable than Mom, more logical, less emotional. I hadn't even thought about calling him because he's not really involved in family planning stuff, but Rachel had a point. Maybe he could offer perspective, or at least validation that I wasn't crazy for being upset. I called him the next day, Saturday morning, when I knew he'd be having his coffee on the patio like he does every weekend. Dad listened quietly while I explained everything. He's always been a good listener, one of the things I appreciate about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised me. He said he wasn't shocked. He told me that Mom has always been the center of everything, even when they were married, that it was one of the reasons their marriage fell apart. She needed constant attention and validation, and everyone in the family had to revolve around her needs and feelings. He'd tried to establish boundaries, to create some balance, but it never worked. The kids, meaning me and my siblings, always took her side because she was so good at playing the victim, at making everything about her pain and her sacrifices. I'd never heard Dad talk about the divorce like this before. Usually, he keeps things vague and diplomatic, but something about this situation had opened a door to honesty. He said he'd watched over the years as my siblings fell into the same pattern with their own families. Everything centered around keeping Mom happy, making sure she felt included and valued and loved, and anyone who didn't fall in line, who dared to have their own needs or boundaries, got pushed aside. He said he was sorry I was experiencing this, but he wasn't surprised. This is just how our family operates. It's been this way for decades. His words hit me hard, because they confirmed something I'd been sensing but didn't want to admit. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't just about a Disney trip. This was a pattern, a fundamental dynamic in my family where I've always been secondary, the expendable one, the one who can be sacrificed for the greater good of keeping Mom happy. And my siblings aren't just enabling it, they're actively participating in it. They've built their own families around this same dynamic, teaching their kids that Grandma is the most important person, that Grandma's feelings matter more than anyone else's, including their aunt who loves them and shows up for them and wants to be part of their lives. Dad asked me what I wanted to do. Did I want to fight this? Try to get my spot back on the trip? Or did I want to let it go and figure out how to move forward, knowing what I now knew about my place in the family? I told him I honestly didn't know. Part of me wanted to fight, wanted to demand they give me my money back at minimum, if not restore my place on the trip. But another part of me felt exhausted at the thought of the battle that would ensue, the accusations of selfishness, the guilt trips about not supporting Mom, the inevitable tears and drama and everyone ganging up on me for rocking the boat. Was it worth it? Would anything actually change? Or would I just be creating chaos and still end up excluded? Dad gave me advice that I'm still trying to process. He said sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is accept reality and adjust your expectations accordingly. That I could keep trying to force my way into a family dynamic that doesn't value me, keep giving and sacrificing and hoping they'd eventually see my worth. Or I could accept that they are who they are, pull back, and invest my energy in relationships that are actually reciprocal. He said it took him years after the divorce to realize he didn't have to keep trying to have a relationship with people who didn't respect him, that walking away, creating distance, wasn't giving up. It was self-preservation. After I hung up with Dad, I sat with his advice for a long time. Self-preservation. The phrase kept echoing in my head. Was that what I needed? To preserve myself from my own family? It felt so drastic, so final. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he might be right. How many times had I bent over backwards for these people? How many times had I rearranged my life, spent money I didn't really have, sacrificed my own comfort and happiness, all to be part of a family that treated me like an afterthought? And what had it gotten me? A text message telling me I'd been replaced because the grandkids loved someone else more. I decided to test something. I wanted to see if anyone would reach out, if anyone would notice my absence from the group chat, or care that I hadn't responded to any messages in days. So I went silent. Completely radio silent. I didn't text, didn't call, didn't react to anything in the family chat that I could still see the notifications for, even though I'd left it. I just waited. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, still nothing. By day 3, I started to feel stupid for even hoping. By day 5, I was angry. A whole work week had passed, and not one single person had checked on me. Not Jennifer, not Marcus, not even Mom, who supposedly loves all her children equally. On day 6, a Sunday, I got a text from Jennifer. Finally, I thought, finally someone noticed. But when I opened it, my heart sank. She wasn't asking if I was okay or why I'd been quiet. She was asking if I still had the contact information for that photographer I'd hired for Emma's birthday party last year. She needed a photographer for an event she was planning and figured I could help her out. That was it. No acknowledgement of the Disney situation, no concern about my well-being, just a casual request for a favor, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just stolen $2,200 from me and given away an experience I'd been dreaming about for months. I didn't respond. I left her on read and felt a petty satisfaction watching the read receipt show up on her end. An hour later, she sent a follow-up, a question mark. Just that, a single question mark, like she was confused why I wasn't jumping to help her immediately. I turned off my read receipts and still didn't respond. If she wanted to pretend everything was fine, I could pretend I didn't see her messages. Two could play at this game. Except it wasn't really a game, was it? This was my life. This was my family. And I was starting to realize that maybe I didn't actually have the family I thought I had. That week at work was tough. I was distracted, unfocused. My boss noticed and called me into her office on Wednesday to ask if everything was okay. I almost brushed it off with the usual, fine, just tired excuse. But something made me be honest. I told her a condensed version of what happened. Family issues, I said, feeling undervalued and taken advantage of. She listened with this expression of understanding sympathy, and when I finished, she said something that stuck with me. She said that we teach people how to treat us, that if we allow bad behavior without consequences, we're essentially giving permission for it to continue. She asked me what consequences my family had faced for treating me this way, and I realized the answer was none. Absolutely none. They'd taken my money, stolen my trip, excluded me from family decisions, ignored me for a week, and faced zero repercussions. Why would they change their behavior when there was no reason to? I'd always just accepted whatever they did, swallowed my hurt feelings, and showed up to the next family event with a smile on my face. I'd trained them to believe they could treat me however they wanted, and I'd still be there, still be available, still be the dependable Aunt Sarah who never complained. My boss suggested I think about what consequences would actually mean something, what boundaries I needed to set to protect myself. It was like she was echoing what my dad had said, but from a different angle. That night, I made a decision. I was going to ask for my money back. Not ask, actually. Demand. I paid $2,200 for a trip I wasn't taking, and regardless of what they thought about Mom deserving it more or the grandkids needing her there, that was my money. I'd worked for it, saved it, and given it to Jennifer in good faith for a specific purpose that was no longer happening. She owed me a refund. The fact that they'd already given it to Mom wasn't my problem. That was something they needed to figure out amongst themselves. I wasn't going to subsidize Mom's vacation after being uninvited from my own trip. I composed a message in my notes app first, editing it over and over until I got the tone right. Firm, but not emotional. Clear about what I wanted without being aggressive. I stated the facts. I had paid $2,200 for my portion of the Disney trip. I was no longer attending the trip due to a decision made without my input or consent. I expected a full refund within 2 weeks. I didn't mention feelings, or hurt, or betrayal. I kept it purely transactional, because I knew that bringing emotions into it would just give them ammunition to paint me as dramatic or unreasonable. When I was satisfied with the message, I sent it to Jennifer directly, not in any group chat, just a one-on-one text. The response came faster than I expected. Within 10 minutes, my phone was ringing. Jennifer calling. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail again. Then a text. We need to talk about this. Then another call. I silenced my phone and went to the gym, needing to burn off the adrenaline and anxiety coursing through my body. By the time I got back an hour later, I had 7 missed calls from Jennifer, 3 from Marcus, and a series of increasingly frantic texts. They ranged from confused to annoyed to outright angry. How could I demand money back that was going to help our mother? Did I not care about family at all? Was I really going to be this selfish and petty? I waited until I'd showered and eaten dinner before I responded to anything. I wanted to be calm, collected, not reactive. I called Jennifer back and she answered on the first ring. Before I could even say hello, she launched into this speech about how disappointed she was in me, how she never thought I'd be the type of person to prioritize money over family, how Mom was on a fixed income and couldn't possibly pay me back, and asking for a refund now would mean Mom couldn't go on the trip at all. Was that what I wanted? To ruin this experience for our elderly mother who had sacrificed so much for us growing up? I let her finish. Let her get it all out. Then I asked her a simple question. Did she think it was fair that I paid for a trip I'm not taking? She sputtered for a second, then said that's not the point. The point is that family helps each other out. The point is that sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good. I asked her if she'd made any sacrifices, if Marcus had, if their spouses had, or was I the only one expected to sacrifice here? Silence on the other end. Then she said that wasn't fair. They were all contributing in their own ways. They were the ones with children, the ones dealing with the stress of parenting and managing households. My life was easier, more flexible. I could afford to be generous. That assumption, that my life was somehow easier because I didn't have kids, made my blood boil. She had no idea what my life was like, no idea about my struggles or my expenses or my challenges. She'd never asked. None of them had ever asked. They just assumed that because I was single and child-free, I had unlimited time and money and emotional energy to give to them whenever they needed it. I told Jennifer that my financial situation was not her business, but that I expected to be reimbursed for a service I paid for and was not receiving. She could figure out how to handle Mom's portion however she wanted, but that wasn't my responsibility. Jennifer's tone shifted then, got colder. She said fine, if that's how I wanted to be, they'd figure something out. But I should know that this was going to have consequences, that the family was already talking about how I'd changed, how I'd become distant and difficult, that the kids were asking why Aunt Sarah wasn't coming on the trip, and they'd had to explain that I chose not to come because I didn't think Grandma should be included. I almost dropped the phone. They'd lied to the kids. They'd told Emma and Lucas that this was my choice, that I didn't want to go if their grandmother was there. They'd made me the bad guy in the story. I asked her point blank if that's what she'd told them, and she didn't even have the decency to sound ashamed. She said they had to tell the kids something, and the truth was too complicated for children to understand. The truth. The truth was that their parents had stolen from their aunt and excluded her from a family trip without warning or discussion. But sure, that was too complicated. Much easier to paint me as the selfish aunt who didn't want to share the trip with Grandma. I wondered if Emma and Lucas would even want to see me anymore after being fed that narrative. If they'd been turned against me the same way everyone else seemed to be turning. I told Jennifer I wanted my money by the end of the month or I'd take further action. I didn't specify what that action would be because honestly I wasn't sure, but it sounded firm and final. She laughed, actually laughed. She said, what was I going to do? Take my own family to small claims court over a vacation? That would be insane. That would make me look completely unhinged. Everyone would know I'd lost my mind over a Disney trip. I'd be the family pariah, the crazy aunt who sued her own sister. Was that really the legacy I wanted? I hung up on her too. Apparently, hanging up on family members was becoming my new thing. The rest of the week was a nightmare. The family group chat, the one I'd left but could still see notifications from before I muted it completely, apparently exploded with discussions about me. I know this because Marcus called and left me a voicemail telling me I needed to apologize to Jennifer for threatening legal action and being unreasonable. That I was tearing the family apart over money. That Mom was crying because she felt responsible for causing conflict between her children. He said if I didn't back down and let this go, there would be serious damage to my relationships with everyone, including the kids. He said I needed to think very carefully about whether $2,200 was worth losing my family over. Rachel came over again that Friday night. She'd been getting updates via text all week, but wanted to see me in person, make sure I was holding up okay. I wasn't, really. I felt like I was going crazy. Like maybe they were right, and I was being unreasonable and selfish and destroying family relationships over money. But Rachel set me straight. She reminded me that this wasn't about the money, not really. It was about respect, about being treated like a person whose feelings and needs mattered. She said that if I back down now, if I let them get away with this without any consequences, I'd be setting a precedent for the rest of my life. They'd know they could do whatever they wanted to me, and I'd eventually cave. She asked me if I'd actually looked into small claims court, and I admitted I hadn't. I just said it to sound serious, but I didn't really think I'd go through with it. Rachel pulled out her laptop right there and started researching. Turns out, in our state, you can file a small claims case for amounts up to $5,000. The filing fee is minimal, like $75. You don't need a lawyer. You just present your evidence, the other party presents theirs, and a judge decides. Rachel said I had a solid case. I had proof I'd paid Jennifer the money, proof it was for a specific purpose, and proof that purpose was no longer being fulfilled. Any reasonable judge would order a refund. The idea of actually taking my sister to small claims court felt surreal, like something that happened in movies or on judge shows on daytime television, not in real life, not in my life. But the more Rachel talked about it, the more I realized it might be my only option, because they'd made it crystal clear they had no intention of giving me my money back willingly. They'd convinced themselves that they were morally right, that supporting Mom was more important than honoring their commitment to me, and nothing I said was going to change their minds. A legal judgment might be the only thing that would actually force them to do the right thing. I spent the weekend going through my records. I had the Venmo transaction to Jennifer showing the exact amount and the date. I had text messages where she'd confirmed the booking and thanked me for my payment. I had screenshots of the group chat where she'd invited me on the trip, and I'd enthusiastically accepted. I had everything I needed to prove that this was a legitimate transaction for a specific service that was no longer being provided. Rachel helped me organize it all into a folder, and by Sunday night I had a complete case file ready to go. I still hadn't decided if I was actually going to file it, but having it prepared made me feel more in control somehow. Monday morning, I got a call from my mom. Finally. 3 weeks after this whole thing started, she was reaching out. Part of me had been hoping she'd call earlier, that she'd be the voice of reason in all this chaos, that she'd tell Jennifer and Marcus they were being ridiculous, and of course they needed to give me my money back. But when I answered and heard her voice, trembling and upset, I knew that wasn't going to happen. She started crying immediately, told me she couldn't believe I was doing this to the family, that she'd raised me better than this, that she never thought any of her children would be so cruel and heartless. I tried to explain my side, but she wasn't interested in hearing it. She said Jennifer had told her everything, how I was demanding money back that I'd essentially given as a gift, how I was trying to exclude her from a trip with her grandchildren because I was jealous of her relationship with them, how I'd become bitter and angry and was taking it out on everyone else. I started to correct her, to explain that literally none of that was true, but she talked right over me. She said she'd decided not to go on the trip at all, that she couldn't enjoy it knowing she was the cause of so much family strife, that she'd rather stay home alone than be the reason her children were fighting. It was emotional manipulation at its finest, and I recognized it immediately because I'd seen her do this my entire life. Whenever there was conflict, whenever someone dared to set a boundary or express a need that inconvenienced her, she'd play the martyr. She'd make it about her pain, her suffering, her willingness to sacrifice everything for peace, and inevitably, whoever had caused the conflict would feel so guilty that they'd back down and apologize, and things would go back to the way Mom wanted them. I'd fallen for it countless times over the years. But this time, something in me had shifted. This time, I saw it for what it was. I told Mom that her decision to go or not go on the trip was entirely up to her, but it didn't change the fact that I'd paid for a trip I wasn't taking and deserved a refund. She gasped like I'd slapped her. She said she couldn't believe how cold I'd become, that money had corrupted me somehow, made me forget what really matters in life, that she was ashamed to call me her daughter right now. Those words should have destroyed me. A year ago, they would have. I would have immediately apologized, promised to let it go, done whatever it took to get back in her good graces. But instead, I felt this strange calm settle over me, because I finally saw the pattern clearly. The way she weaponized shame and guilt to control people, the way she made everything about her feelings while completely disregarding everyone else's. I told her I was sorry she felt that way, but I stood by my decision. She hung up on me. So now I'd been hung up on by 2 family members and hung up on 2 others myself. We were really batting 1,000 here. I sat there staring at my phone, waiting for the wave of guilt and sadness to hit me, waiting to feel terrible about upsetting my mother. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt relieved, like a weight had been lifted, because I'd finally stood up for myself. I'd finally said no. I'd finally refused to be the family doormat, and the sky hadn't fallen. The world hadn't ended. I was okay. That afternoon, I went to the courthouse during my lunch break. I picked up the small claims forms and filled them out right there at one of those tall tables they have in the lobby. Plaintiff Sarah Mitchell versus defendant Jennifer Harrison. Amount claimed $2,200. Description of claim: payment for travel services not rendered. I stood in line at the clerk's office, my heart pounding, second-guessing myself with every passing minute. When I got to the window, the clerk was this middle-aged woman with kind eyes who asked how she could help me. I slid the forms across the counter and said I needed to file a small claims case. She looked over the paperwork, asked a few clarifying questions, and stamped everything official. She told me I'd receive a court date in the mail within a few weeks, and that Jennifer would be served with the summons. That was it. It was done. I'd actually sued my sister. I walked back to my car in a daze, not quite believing what I'd just done. Part of me wanted to run back inside and withdraw the filing, tell them I'd made a mistake. But I didn't. I got in my car, sat there for a minute collecting myself, and then drove back to work. I'd crossed a line, and there was no going back now. Whatever happened next, I'd have to live with it. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even Rachel, though I knew she'd be proud of me for following through. I just wanted to sit with it for a bit, process what I'd done. That evening, I went for a long walk around my neighborhood, trying to imagine what would happen next. How would Jennifer react when she got served? Would she tell the whole family immediately? Or would she try to handle it quietly? Would they all band together against me even more than they already had? Would I end up completely estranged from everyone? The questions spun through my mind, but underneath all the anxiety was this core of certainty. I'd done the right thing. I'd stood up for myself. Finally. 2 weeks went by in tense silence. I didn't hear from anyone in my family, which was honestly a relief. I threw myself into work, spent time with Rachel and my other friends, tried to live my life normally, even though I was checking my mailbox obsessively every day, waiting for the court date notification. I'd also been checking my bank account, half hoping that maybe Jennifer would just transfer the money back to avoid court. But nothing. No payment, no message, no olive branch. They were really going to make me go through with this. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Dave, Jennifer's husband. In all the years they'd been married, Dave had maybe called me directly 3 times. He's always been nice enough, kind of quiet, lets Jennifer run the show. He started off apologetic, saying he hoped I didn't mind him calling. He said Jennifer had been served with the court papers that morning, and things had gotten intense at their house. She was furious and upset, convinced I was trying to humiliate her publicly. Marcus and his wife had come over, and apparently it had turned into this whole family emergency meeting. Dave said he wasn't calling to take sides or try to talk me out of anything. He just wanted me to know what was happening, and give me a heads up that things were probably going to get worse before they got better. He admitted, in this quiet, careful voice, that he'd never thought the Disney situation was handled well, that he'd told Jennifer from the beginning that they should have talked to me first before making any decisions. But nobody listened to him, and honestly that didn't surprise me because nobody ever really listens to Dave. Jennifer makes all the decisions and he just goes along with it. He said he understood why I was doing what I was doing, even if he couldn't say that to anyone else. I thanked him for calling, and for being honest with me. Before he hung up, he said one more thing. He told me that Emma had been asking about me constantly, wanting to know when she'd see Aunt Sarah again, asking if I was mad at her, worried that she'd done something wrong. He'd tried to reassure her that it wasn't about her at all, but she was 8 and didn't really understand adult conflicts. She just knew that her favorite aunt had suddenly disappeared from her life. That information hit me harder than anything else. I'd been so focused on the principle of the thing, on standing up for myself and demanding fair treatment, that I hadn't fully considered how this was affecting the kids. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma's little face, confused and sad, wondering why I wasn't around anymore. I'd missed her soccer game last weekend, something I never missed. I hadn't texted her any funny memes or cat videos in weeks. From her perspective, I'd just vanished. And what had Jennifer told her? Probably that Aunt Sarah was too busy, or that Aunt Sarah had chosen not to be part of the family anymore. Certainly nothing close to the truth. I wondered if there was a way to maintain my relationship with the kids while also maintaining my boundaries with their parents, or if that was even possible at this point. Friday morning, I got a text from Marcus. The first direct communication I'd had from him since our disastrous phone call weeks ago. The message was short and sharp. He said I needed to drop the lawsuit immediately, that I was embarrassing the entire family and causing Mom serious emotional distress. He said her blood pressure had been through the roof and her doctor was concerned. He reminded me that she's not getting any younger and this kind of stress could literally kill her. Did I want to be responsible for that? Did I want to live with knowing I'd caused my own mother a heart attack over money? He said I had until the end of the day to withdraw the case, or there would be consequences. Consequences. I stared at that word for a long time. What consequences could there possibly be that hadn't already happened? They'd already excluded me, already lied about me, already turned Mom against me. What else was there? I didn't respond to Marcus. Instead, I called my dad again, told him everything that had happened since we last spoke. The lawsuit, the family meltdown, the threats. He listened carefully, and when I finished, he asked me one question. Do you believe you're in the right here? I said yes, absolutely. I'd paid for something I wasn't receiving and deserved a refund. Simple as that. He said then I should see it through, that backing down now would just teach them that threats and guilt trips work, and they'd use those tactics on me forever. But then he said something that surprised me. He suggested I consider offering a compromise. Not because I was wrong, but because sometimes being right isn't the same as being at peace. He suggested I offer to settle outside of court for a partial refund, maybe $1,500 instead of the full $2,200. Frame it as a gift to help Mom with her expenses, but make it clear that I'm owed the money and am being generous by not demanding all of it. It would let them save face, might preserve some family relationships, and I'd still get most of my money back. It was worth considering, he said, worth thinking about what I really wanted out of this situation. I spent the whole weekend thinking about Dad's suggestion. Part of me rebelled against it. Why should I compromise? Why should I accept less than what I was owed? They were the ones who'd wronged me. They should be the ones making concessions. But another part of me, the tired part that was exhausted from weeks of conflict and stress, saw the wisdom in it. Because what did I really want here? Did I want every penny back as a matter of principle? Or did I want some acknowledgement that I'd been wronged, some restitution, and maybe a path forward that didn't involve complete family estrangement? The more I thought about it, the more the compromise made sense. Monday morning, I drafted a message to Jennifer. I'd rewritten it probably 20 times over the weekend, trying to find the right balance between firm and conciliatory. I stated clearly that I believed I was owed the full $2,200 for a trip I'd paid for and was not taking. However, I wrote, in the interest of family peace and recognizing that Mom was now committed to the trip, I was willing to accept $1,500 as a settlement. The remaining $700 could be considered my contribution toward Mom's expenses. This was a one-time offer, valid for 1 week. If she didn't accept it, we'd proceed to court and let a judge decide. I read it over one final time, made sure the tone was professional and unemotional, and hit send before I could second-guess myself again. Then I waited. Hours went by with no response. I tried to focus on work but kept checking my phone compulsively. By lunchtime, I'd convinced myself she was going to ignore the offer entirely. But then, at 2:15, my phone buzzed. Jennifer had responded. Her message was short. She said she needed to discuss it with Dave and would get back to me by the end of the week. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was something. Wednesday evening, 3 days after I'd sent the offer, Jennifer called me. I answered on the third ring, trying to sound calmer than I felt. She started by saying that she'd talked to Dave, and they'd talked to Marcus and Ashley, and they'd all talked to Mom. Everyone agreed that this whole situation had gotten out of hand, and they wanted to find a resolution. She said they were willing to accept my settlement offer on one condition. I had to agree to drop the lawsuit immediately and sign something saying I wouldn't pursue any further legal action related to this matter. And I had to attend a family dinner where we could all talk things through and move forward. The family dinner requirement gave me pause. It felt like a setup, like an opportunity for them to gang up on me and make me apologize for standing up for myself. I told Jennifer I'd agree to drop the lawsuit and sign whatever reasonable document she needed, but the family dinner was optional. I'd consider it, but I wasn't making any promises. She got quiet for a moment, then said the dinner was non-negotiable. They needed closure on this, needed to clear the air, needed to make sure we were all on the same page moving forward. Besides, Emma and Lucas missed me and deserved to see their aunt. She was using the kids as leverage again, and we both knew it. I agreed, but only on my terms. The dinner would be at a neutral location, a restaurant, not someone's home where I could feel trapped. It would be limited to 2 hours maximum, and we'd establish some ground rules beforehand, like no yelling, no ganging up on one person. Everyone gets a chance to speak without interruption. Jennifer sighed heavily, clearly annoyed that I wasn't just falling in line, but she agreed. We set it for the following Saturday at a family-friendly Italian place near the mall. She said she'd have Dave write up a simple agreement about dropping the lawsuit and not pursuing further legal action, and she'd transfer the $1,500 to my account once I signed it. The next few days were a blur of anxiety. I kept playing out scenarios in my head of how the dinner would go. Would they ambush me with accusations and demands for apologies? Would Mom cry and make everything about her feelings? Would the kids be confused and uncomfortable? Rachel offered to come with me for moral support, but this felt like something I needed to do alone. She made me promise to text her every hour during the dinner so she'd know I was okay, and to call her immediately afterward. I appreciated her concern, even though I knew I'd be fine. Uncomfortable maybe, but fine. Saturday arrived too quickly. I changed outfits 3 times, trying to find something that felt right. Not too casual, like I didn't care. Not too dressy, like I was trying too hard. I settled on dark jeans and a nice sweater, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. I wanted to look put together, but not overly concerned with their opinions. I got to the restaurant 10 minutes early and sat in my car giving myself a pep talk. I had every right to be here. I'd done nothing wrong. I'd stood up for myself in a reasonable way. Whatever happened in there, I could handle it. When I walked in, they were already seated at a large round table in the back corner. Jennifer and Dave, Marcus and Ashley, Mom and the 3 kids, Emma, Lucas, and Sophia. Everyone stopped talking when they saw me approaching. Emma's face lit up and she started to get out of her chair, but Jennifer put a hand on her shoulder, keeping her seated. I said hello to everyone generally, got a few mumbled greetings in return, and sat down in the empty chair between Dave and Sophia. The awkwardness was suffocating. Even the kids seemed to sense the tension, sitting quieter than usual, looking back and forth between the adults. A waiter came by and took drink orders, giving us a temporary reprieve from the silence. Once he left, Jennifer cleared her throat and said she appreciated everyone coming together for this. She said family is the most important thing, and they'd all been reminded of that over the past few weeks. She looked at me when she said it, and I knew she was implying that I was the one who'd forgotten that family comes first. I bit my tongue and stayed quiet. She continued, saying that they'd all agreed to Sarah's settlement offer because they wanted to move past this conflict. Dave would give me the agreement to sign after dinner, and she'd transfer the money by Monday. Then came the part I'd been dreading. Jennifer said that before we could really move forward, there were some things that needed to be said, some feelings that needed to be expressed. She said I'd hurt a lot of people with my actions over the past month, and they deserved to hear an apology. I felt my face get hot. An apology? They wanted me to apologize? For what, exactly? For expecting to be treated with basic respect? For wanting the money I'd paid for a trip I wasn't taking? I looked around the table and saw them all watching me expectantly, waiting for me to bow my head and say I was sorry for causing trouble. I took a deep breath and made a decision in that moment. I wasn't going to apologize for things I didn't do wrong, but I also wasn't going to let this dissolve into a screaming match in front of the kids. I said I was sorry that the situation had caused pain and conflict in the family. That was true. I was sorry about that. But I also needed to be clear about my perspective. I explained, calmly and simply, that I'd been invited on a trip, had paid a significant amount of money, had planned for months, and then had my spot given away without any discussion or warning. That anyone in my position would have been hurt and upset. That asking for a refund wasn't unreasonable, it was basic fairness. Marcus cut me off. He said I was making this all about the money, when it was really about family loyalty. That Mom had done so much for all of us over the years and deserved to have this experience with her grandchildren. That I should have been happy to contribute to that instead of making everyone's life miserable with lawyers and lawsuits. I pointed out, as gently as I could, that nobody had asked me to contribute. They'd taken without asking. There's a difference between generously giving and having something taken from you. If they'd come to me and said, "We want Mom to come instead, would you be willing to help fund her trip?" we could have had a conversation. But that's not what happened. Mom started crying then, right on cue. She said she never wanted to cause problems between her children, that she'd told them from the beginning she didn't need to go on any trip, she was fine staying home, that she felt terrible knowing she was the reason we were all fighting. Jennifer immediately moved to comfort her, shooting me a look that clearly said, "See what you've done?" I felt the familiar pull of guilt, the urge to back down and make Mom feel better. But I also noticed something I'd never noticed before. The way Jennifer and Marcus immediately shifted all their attention to Mom, the way they positioned themselves as her protectors, the way I automatically became the bad guy for upsetting her. It was a practiced routine, performed so many times it was almost choreographed. Ashley, Marcus's wife, spoke up then. She'd been quiet up until this point, and I'd always thought of her as kind of neutral in family drama. She said that maybe everyone could have handled things better, that maybe Sarah had a point about the communication being poor, that maybe they should have talked to her before making the decision instead of after. It wasn't much, but it was the first time anyone had acknowledged that I might have legitimate reasons to be upset. Marcus looked annoyed with his wife, but she continued. She said moving forward they should probably make sure everyone's on the same page before making big family decisions. That seemed like common sense, right? Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but Dave put his hand on her arm. He said Ashley was right, that they could all do better with communication, that this whole thing had been a learning experience for everyone. Mom wiped her eyes and said she just wanted her family to be happy and together, that all she'd ever wanted was for her children to love each other and support each other. Emma, who'd been sitting quietly through all of this, looking increasingly confused and worried, suddenly spoke up. She asked in this small voice if Aunt Sarah was going to come to her birthday party next month, if we were still friends. My heart broke a little. I looked at this sweet 8-year-old girl who had nothing to do with any of the adult drama, but was somehow caught in the middle of it anyway. I told her, of course we were still friends, that I loved her very much and I'd never miss her birthday party. She smiled, relieved, and asked if I could still help her with her book report on Tuesday, like I'd promised before everything happened. I'd completely forgotten about that promise, made weeks ago before the Disney bomb dropped. I told her absolutely. I'd come over Tuesday after school and we'd work on it together. Jennifer looked like she wanted to object but didn't, probably because doing so in front of Emma would make her look petty. The waiter returned with our drinks and took our dinner orders, which broke the tension somewhat. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Lucas told me about his soccer team making the playoffs. Sophia showed me a loose tooth that was barely hanging on. Dave asked about my job and seemed genuinely interested in the marketing campaign I'd been working on. It almost felt normal, or at least a simulation of normal. We were all playing our parts, pretending the past month hadn't happened, pretending everything was fine. Maybe that's what family dinners were sometimes. Performance art where everyone agreed to ignore the dysfunction long enough to share a meal. After dinner, Dave pulled out a single sheet of paper from his jacket pocket. It was the agreement Jennifer had mentioned, typed up officially looking, but actually pretty simple. It said that I agreed to withdraw the small claims case against Jennifer Harrison and would not pursue any further legal action related to the Disney World trip payment. In exchange, Jennifer would pay me $1,500 within 3 business days. I read it twice, looking for any tricky language or loopholes, but it seemed straightforward. I signed it, Dave witnessed it, and just like that, it was done. The legal part was over. As we all stood to leave, Mom pulled me aside. She looked tired, older than I'd ever seen her. She said she hoped we could put this all behind us now, that she hated being the cause of conflict and just wanted her family back to normal. I almost said that things were never really normal, that there'd always been these dynamics and patterns and problems. We'd just all gotten good at ignoring them. But I didn't. I just hugged her and said I hoped so too. Because what else could I say? That I'd finally seen through the manipulation and would never unsee it? That our family was fundamentally dysfunctional, and this was just the first time I'd refused to play along. Some truths don't need to be spoken out loud. On Tuesday, I went to Jennifer's house to help Emma with her book report like I'd promised. Jennifer was civil, offered me coffee, made small talk about the weather. We were both being careful, polite, like strangers at a business meeting. Emma and I worked on her report about Charlotte's Web, and for an hour I got to just be Aunt Sarah again, helping with homework and laughing at her jokes and feeling like maybe some things could be salvaged from this mess. When I left, Emma hugged me tight and made me promise to come to her birthday party. I promised. The money showed up in my account Thursday morning, $1,500. I stared at the transaction for a long time, this number that represented so much more than just money. It represented me standing up for myself for the first time. It represented boundaries and consequences and the painful realization that sometimes doing the right thing costs you more than you expected to pay. I transferred $700 of it to my savings account and used the rest to book a solo trip to Charleston, somewhere I'd always wanted to visit but never had the time or money for. If I wasn't going to Disney World with my family, I'd at least treat myself to something special. Rachel asked me if I felt like I'd won. We were having coffee at our favorite cafe, the same place where I'd cried to her about the initial text message that started everything. I thought about her question for a while. Had I won? I got most of my money back. I stood up for myself. I set boundaries. But I'd also damaged relationships, maybe permanently. I'd seen sides of my family I couldn't unsee. I'd lost some innocence about what family means and who these people really are. That didn't feel like winning exactly. It felt more like surviving. Like making it through something difficult and coming out the other side changed. I told Rachel I didn't know if I'd won, but I knew I'd done what I needed to do. That for the first time in my adult life, I'd prioritized my own well-being over family harmony. That I'd refused to be the person who just absorbs hurt and mistreatment without complaint, because keeping the peace is more important than having self-respect. She smiled and said that sounded like winning to her. Maybe she was right. Maybe winning doesn't always look like happy endings and reconciliation. Maybe sometimes winning looks like walking away with your dignity intact and your eyes open. The Disney trip happened 2 weeks later. I didn't ask about it and nobody volunteered information. I saw a few photos pop up on Facebook. Mom with the kids in front of Cinderella's castle, everyone wearing matching family t-shirts that I definitely would have refused to wear anyway. They looked happy. I scrolled past without reacting, without commenting, without that familiar ache of missing out. Because here's what I finally understood. I hadn't been excluded from a family trip. I'd been freed from the obligation to keep performing in a dynamic that didn't value me. My relationship with my family now exists in a different form. I still see the kids, still help with homework and show up for soccer games. I'm civil with Jennifer and Marcus, polite with Mom. We don't talk about what happened. We all just moved forward, carrying the knowledge of it silently. Sometimes I wonder if they learned anything from the experience, if they ever think about how they treated me and whether it was right. Probably not. People rarely do that kind of self-examination, especially when they've convinced themselves they were justified. But I learned something. I learned that family isn't an excuse for mistreatment, that love without respect isn't really love at all, that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. I learned that standing up for yourself is lonely and hard and uncomfortable, but so is spending your whole life being a doormat. I learned that you teach people how to treat you, and I'd been teaching my family that I'd accept anything. I've stopped teaching that lesson. Am I wrong to be hurt? That's the question, right? The one that's been echoing in my head since this whole thing started, and I finally have my answer. No. I'm not wrong to be hurt when people I love treat me like I'm disposable. I'm not wrong to expect basic consideration and honesty. I'm not wrong to value myself enough to demand fair treatment. Being replaced by my own mother, being told the grandkids love her more, being excluded and lied to and manipulated, all of that warranted hurt. The hurt was the appropriate response. The question was never whether I should be hurt. The question was what I would do about it. And what I did was choose myself. For the first time, I chose myself. I chose my dignity over their approval. I chose my boundaries over their convenience. I chose truth over the comfortable fiction we'd all been maintaining. It cost me something, sure. It changed things in ways I can't undo. But it also freed me. From the constant striving to be good enough, to be included, to matter to people who'd already decided I didn't matter as much as someone else. I'm free from that now. And that's worth more than $2,200. That's worth more than a trip to Disney World. That's worth everything.